Okay, we'll get started. So good afternoon, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us. In our last presentation, we explored imposter syndrome and how self-doubt can trigger stress responses in the body. This time, we're looking at the deeper patterns underneath those reactions and how early attachment experiences shape the way we handle uncertainty, feedback, boundaries, and decision-making in business. So leading us in the discussion and backed by popular demand is our good friend Candice. She's the founder of Reflect, Reset, Renew Therapy Services, a Niagara-based group practice supporting individuals, couples, families, and children. Candice likes an interactive session, so if you raise your hand, I will prompt you to unmute. You'll be allowed to speak, and you can ask your question or comment. Additionally, you can also submit your questions or comments throughout the presentation with the chat button at the bottom of your screen. So at this time, I'm going to mute myself and I'm going to turn it over to you, Candice.
All right. Hello, everybody. So technology is not my forefront, so you just bear with me here and let's get this going. Okay. And of course, it's not working. Okay, there we go. Nope, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for this. Perfect. Can everybody see the screen?
Yes.
Wonderful. Oh, that was more flawless than the last time. I'm getting better. Awesome. Well, welcome everybody. It is such a pleasure to be back again. And wow, popular demand. That kind of felt good to hear. That's exciting. Thanks again for having me. So, like Dolores said, the last time we connected, we talked a lot about imposter syndrome, kind of what imposter syndrome is, what some of the symptoms of imposter syndrome are, and the different ways that we can experience imposter syndrome and how it shows up in the body. More specifically, how it shows up in our nervous system. So for those who aren't familiar with how the nervous system is all intertwined within imposter syndrome, it basically is our fight, flight, freeze, fawn response and our survival mechanism, or our alarm system, if you will, that is located in our body that works very closely with our brain, namely our subconscious brain, at keeping us safe within our environment. So we pick up cues subconsciously and our brain reacts accordingly. Depending on what some of those earlier life experiences are, will determine how we will react in terms of the fight, flight, freeze, fawn pattern. Say that 5 times fast. Okay, so like I said, last time we met, we really normalized the fact that running a business can feel like an assault, a daily assault on your nervous system. There's ups, there's downs, there's excitement, there's nervousness, there's anxiety, there's fear, a long list of emotions that owning a business can cause and we can experience. So today we're taking that conversation a bit further. We're going to look under the hood of your business operations. Okay, we aren't looking at necessarily feelings, and of course that may come up in conversation, but that's not necessarily the point of today's presentation. We're looking more at workflows, your calendars, and your team dynamics to see exactly where your stress has been calling the shots for you in your business. Now, you will hear me refer a lot to staff or employees. I understand that not every business has staff or employees, but keeping in mind when we're talking about kind of delegating and reaching out for help, this could be from family, this can be from hired, services or programs outside of your business. So a marketing team, for example, or perhaps someone who manages your Google business accounts, things like that. So keep that in mind when I use staff or colleagues, things like that. Okay. So imposter syndrome or business stress is not just a feeling. It determines how we operationalize our business. So the structural bottlenecks that we may feel, oh, hang on here, the arrows are not working. There we go. Oh, there we go. Went too far ahead. There we go. Okay. So the structural bottlenecks in our businesses, like poor delegation, scope creep, which ultimately just means kind of infringing on other people helping support your delegation, perhaps increasing the scope of a project or new program or new staff, so on and so forth, and team turnover. These are rarely failures of strategy. Instead, they're exact organizational charts, workflows that we design subconsciously and sometimes consciously that are created from earlier life experiences that create relational patterns that make us feel safe. Now, when I mean safe, I don't just mean physical safety, I also mean emotional safety, the safety that comes along with taking risk and trying new things. So true scaling, when we're truly scaling our business, it requires shifting our business from structure built on survival strategies to one that's built on secure systems. So I'm going to put a few options on the screen here. It's an interactive exercise. You don't have to share right away, but I'm going to read them. Take a look at them, kind of sit with them for a second or two and see if there's any particular one on the screen that you identify with. And you may identify with one or more of these patterns. So the solitary fortress. When a team member, contractor, or partner misses a detail, you quietly take back the work and do it yourself rather than managing through it. B, the endless pretzel. A client asks for something outside of your original contract and you said yes without charging them to avoid an awkward conversation. The serial pivot. You suddenly launch a new brand, change your software, or rewrite your core services on a whim just to inject fresh energy into the room. And lastly, the ostrich method. You're terrified to look at your cash flow spreadsheets, so you just work harder, hoping the number goes up out of sheer effort. Okay, so take a second, sit with that. See which one you identify with closely. And again, it might be more than one, or it might shift throughout the time of owning your business. And if anyone does feel comfortable sharing, I'd love to hear which one you identify with most, or perhaps, again, like I said, more than one. If you're comfortable sharing, I would love to hear. Doris, I can't really see anything, so I don't really know.
Yeah, I'm keeping an eye on it.
Perfect. Okay. All righty. Wonderful. Okay. So if no one is comfortable sharing, that's totally okay. It can be a bit vulnerable sometimes to share things of this nature. So quietly reflect on whether or not the letter that you chose, if that pattern vanished tomorrow, what is the biggest thing that you're secretly afraid would happen? Would you lose control? Would you feel unnecessary? Would you have no more excuses for why you aren't scaling? So for me, I tend to experience a couple of these. So basically, the solitary fortress, although I'm happy to share that I think I'm in the process of overcoming this one, but I'm going to share anyways just to provide an example to apply the theory to real life experiences. So when a team member, contractor, or partner misses a detail, you quietly take back the work and do it yourself, then managing through it. So for me, I struggle with asking for help. I struggle with delegating tasks. I struggle with feeling like asking for people to do any type of tasks within my business feels like a burden to them. So I am proud to say that I have recently delegated a variety of different tasks that I was having a really hard time letting go of, to my admin staff, who, unbeknownst to me, absolutely loves doing it. And that is content creation, namely like Canva posts and more graphics and things like that. So she has taken on that task and absolutely loves it. And the fact that she loves it makes me feel better and makes me feel more comfortable knowing that she's enjoying it, and then I've delegated that task. So that's an example for me. Another example for me is the endless pretzel. When a client asks for something outside of the original contract, and I said yes without changing them to avoid an awkward talk, although it's not necessarily pertaining to contracts, but I have a set schedule that I try to abide by. And when a client cannot meet within that schedule that I do provide, I do sometimes bend myself into a pretzel to make the time frame work for the client. But again, something that I'm actively working on. So these things may show up for us, but and we may be actively working on them. So they might not necessarily be as much of a challenge now as they have been in the past, but we're constantly evolving and constantly shifting. Does anyone feel comfortable sharing kind of what would vanish tomorrow if the biggest thing you were secretly afraid of would happen? Okay. So some more questions.
Oh,
Oopsie.
hold
Sorry.
on, we've got one.
Oh,
Stephen, go ahead.
So for me, be the serial in my business, I kind of feel like I am just trying to push things and things have a better model to try and appeal to more. And I think the mindset of that fear went away. Like have confidence uh, that we have. I think still really move forward in other direction.
sorry, Stephen, you're cutting out a little bit. So I'm having a bit of a hard time hearing you.
Sorry about that. I said, can you hear me now?
Yes, that's much better.
I was just saying that the serial pivot for me would be where, within my business, I'm constantly just trying to change the business model to see what would be successful and try and drive new business. But if that mindset and that fear went away and just had confidence in terms of what we offer, then I think that, we could still drive the business forward rather than just constantly trying to refresh everything.
Hmm. So what happens for you when you feel like things are slowing down or when you feel like something fresh needs to happen? Kind of what leads you to making that change or leads you to recognizing, oh, we should try this or we should try that?
Well, I think it's just the fear of, you know, just fear of uh, missing out on business or just not having confidence in what we're offering. We might have a slower month. That might not be a product of the business itself. It might just be customers aren't or clients are on vacation or it's Christmas time or there might be some other things that are going on aside from the business offering. So for me, it's oh wow, like we're losing money or we might not make as much money if we didn't change things up or we're leaving money on the table because we don't offer this certain service.
Okay. Okay. So there's feels like the goalpost is always moving.
100%.
Yeah. And that can become overwhelming very quickly.
Well, as I said, you just want to make sure that you're not leaving money on the table, right? You don't want to miss out on opportunities, to grow your business.
For sure. And some of us are so full of exciting ideas and want to try so many new things, myself included, that sometimes, yeah, you can get ahead of yourself and really want to implement everything right away because it's so exciting and you're so passionate and wanting to grow and see different areas where you can support the community or your clients or your growth. And sometimes it can get really exciting and get overwhelming quite quickly.
Yes, exactly. And it's like constantly just trying to reinvent the wheel, right? So like instead of fine tuning what we already offer, it doesn't always make sense to just jump into a new division or a new, scope of business. It might be better spent time better spent just kind of refining what we already offer and trying to market that in a better way rather than launching something new.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing. I know some of this conversation is a bit on the vulnerable side, like I said. So thank you for speaking up and sharing and sharing your experience with all of us. I really appreciate that. Okay. So we don't just sit with discomfort or feeling like a fraud or an imposter. We do something much more expensive. We build our entire workflows around it to try and outrun it. Because when you look closely at how survival mechanisms operate, it's always relying on three invisible rules. The first one is imposter syndrome demands constant, exhausting proof of your worth, which inevitably forces you to get into a cycle of chronic over delivery. Second, it successfully translates a temporary internal feeling into permanent external operating system. And finally, it convinces us to accidentally weaponize our own excellence, overworking just to build a shield that keeps us safe from criticism. But underneath the strategy is physiology. A dysregulated nervous system will always seek safety through hyper awareness. In our daily lives, this manifests as an obsession with tracking every micro variable, subconsciously trying to prevent the catastrophic exposure of simply being flawed, which we talked a lot about the last presentation, of being seen and having people being able to have access to you in a way that leaves you open for potential criticism and compliments too. We don't want to ignore that part. So I want you to challenge your view of this dynamic. Think of as imposter syndrome not as a passenger, a passive passenger that's riding along with you in your car, but rather a backseat driver who quickly took the wheel while you were looking at your targets. You didn't just happen to feel like an imposter recently. You actively designed a life and process that requires you to do 60 hours a week just to prove that you aren't one. What is the one thing you're in your business that is completely draining you, but you refuse to delegate because you secretly think no one else can do it as well as you? And I can set this off there. So for me, it's intake. As you guys know, I run a group practice. We have a team of 9. There's a good handful of us, and my role as the clinic owner is to try and fill people's schedules, get out there, meeting people, and spreading the word of the incredible clinicians that work here to fill their schedule, while also simultaneously running the back end of the business and also supporting my own caseload, which I've recently lowered. And of course, other events and different things things like this, for example, workshops, and constantly going out and meeting people. So one of the things that I still am struggling to let go of is intake. So on top of doing all of those things, I make sure that every email is answered and every phone call is answered as quickly as possible. So, the quicker, the better. With therapy, among, many other different businesses, people will call 3, 4, 5 people before they make a decision. Oftentimes when people call for therapy, there's some sort of crisis, or there's something happening in their lives where they just want to reach out and get support as quickly as possible. So I like to just do the intake and assess who would be the best clinician for them, and getting back to people quickly. But as my role shifts around here, sometimes I don't have time to always answer the phone. And as we get busier and as we grow, as one human doing the business as well as the intake coordination, things like that, along with my own caseload and other exciting things that I'm exploring and growing in, it's going to be something that I have to give up. But the reason why I think no one can do it as well as me, and I don't mean that from an egotistical way, I mean it more from, I want to be able to respond to people quickly, and I don't want to put that expectation on someone else that they respond within half an hour, 15 minutes, hour, of course, depending on what's happening throughout the day. But for me, it's more about, not about them not doing it well. It's putting the responsibility or the expectation on someone else to do it as quickly as I would. So with that being said, is there anyone else who'd like to share what one thing is that one thing that is happening in your business that's completely draining you, but you refuse to delegate because you secretly think no one else can do it as well as you, or you fear burdening someone else, or something that prevents you from delegating but is actually draining you?
So just as a reminder for the folks who joined us a little late, if you raise your hand, if you use the icon at the bottom, we will unmute you and you can provide your comments, answer the question, do all of that. So you just need to use the little icon at the bottom of your screen to raise your hand.
Okay. So next part of the conversation we're going to get into is attachment theory. So no one actually needs to say anything about this, but Dolores, if you can let me know if anyone raises their hand around, has anyone ever heard of attachment theory before, whether it be in university, perhaps in your own kind of therapy experience, or on TikTok or any type of social media?
No one has raised their hand.
Okay, alrighty. So attachment theory is a theory that is typically known for looking at relationship patterns, so romantic relationship patterns. However, with that being said, the research on attachment theory is starting to expand in multiple different areas, and one of them is workplace and business. How our attachment styles, which we'll go over shortly, show up in our business and show up in how we navigate through our business and interact with others. So attachment theory is a psychological framework that explains how we handle risk, trust, and control in relationships. Again, it's not just for romantic partnerships or parenting. It's around looking at how trust or lack thereof, for that matter, or risk, or your ability to take risk, or your comfort with taking risk, and your control that shows up in how you're, like I said, delegating and showing up in your business. So the reality is when you open a company or start a business, the reality of it is we do enter into some type of relationship with our business. It becomes our baby. We often hear people say, "Oh, my business is my baby. I don't want anyone else to do X or Y because they're not going to do it as good as me. It's my baby," right? So we often look at our business as though it's going to sound kind of silly, but that we're in a relationship with it. Because of course we want to see it thrive. We want to see it grow. We want to be successful. It's why we started to get our business to begin with. So some of us are desperately trying to make our business love us back. Some of us are terrified that it's going to swallow us whole. And some of us refuse to trust anyone else inside of it. Think of your attachment, your style of attachment, as a inner operational blueprint, a subconscious set of rules shaped by your earlier life experiences that dictate how you show up in your business. This blueprint gets established, like I said, earlier on in life based on whether your childhood environment taught you to rely on others or forced you to adopt personality patterns, belief system, and emotional rules that protect you. If you grew up learning that support was inconsistent or that safety required perfection, your blueprint adapted to your environment. As adults, that exact blueprint, carrying your deep-seated belief systems around communications, understanding your needs, identifying your needs, expressing your needs, and stress responses, doesn't just stay home when you go to work. You apply it directly to how you manage your team, interact with your colleagues, and handle your daily operations today as an adult. So now let's look at the 4 specific ways this inner blueprint shows up for us. Okay, so there's 4 different types of attachment styles. Okay, the first one is avoidant, or can be described as being hyper independent. So an avoidant person, or someone who's avoidant, who has an avoidant attachment style pattern, they seek safety through distance. People become unpredictable, and that you're only reliable. You rely on yourself. You will build a business that only works if you do. So you become kind of this independent, silo that deals with everything in your business. You won't ask for help, or if you do ask for help, it's very limited and it has to be done in a certain way. Otherwise, you'll take the task back. Then there's anxious, which is also known as people pleasing. So safety through closeness. You must anticipate every client's mood to ensure that they don't leave you, and your boundaries are porous, meaning you don't really have any, or they're very kind of limited or easily manipulated. Okay. And then there's disorganized, which is the reactive pivot. And this is safety through chaos. Stability feels suspicious or boring. You create strategic crises to feel alive and in control. So this goes back to, changing your systems, changing different approaches, constantly shifting and changing your business. The goalpost is always moving. And then, of course, there's secure, which we all hope to be and want to be, felt but processed. So trusting yourself enough to lead, set boundaries, collaborate, and grow without seeking constant external validation. So these relational blueprints are stored in your unconscious memory. When the stakes are high, your survival brain defaults to these baselines. Okay, so now we're going to go over each one a little bit more in detail. If you want it done right, do it yourself, something we commonly hear. That's not a badge of quality or of honor. It's an avoidant defense mechanism. When we look at how this manifests under the surface, we see a specific pattern. It begins with avoidant dismissive style of leadership, intentionally keeping your team at arm's length and your contractors at arm's length. It's driven by deeply buried subconscious belief that people will ultimately drop the ball and relying on them is dangerous or they can't be relied upon. The structural result, hyper-independence that caps your revenue capacity, bottlenecks daily operations directly at the CEO desk. So if everything has to go through you and your business is busy, things are going to slow down and things are not going to come to fruition as quickly if you're the one who has to be, the deciding factor all the time. Mind you, as the owner, of course, you have to ultimately make the decisions. But even if the small decisions are having to go through you, that can eventually bottleneck your business and prevent you from putting your time and attention elsewhere. Psychologically, this is what we call a deactivating strategy. Your nervous system and body has equated absolute self-reliance with absolute safety. To truly depend on a team member, a peer, or a partner feels like leaving yourself completely exposed to unpredictable and catastrophic failure. Think about this, about the phase that has stalled businesses in our region, or worldwide, really, more than inflation. If you want it done right, do it yourself. We like to frame this to our peers as a role of where it's noble commitment to excellence, but it's just an avoidance strategy designed to prevent the vulnerability of relying on others and the fear of being let down. Oops. The cost of the solidarity fortress. Hyper-independence does not protect your business. It exhausts your team and guarantees burnout. This survival rule extracts a massive 3-part tax on your organization: the operational cost, micromanagement, and pattern of driving away top-tier talent who expect autonomy; a cultural cost, a team that feels constantly mistrusted, which means they will eventually stop trying, stop innovating, and eventually check out. What we are actually looking at here is chronic triggering of the nervous system / body. It is a constant flight, fight, fear feeling, cleverly disguised to the outside world as a hustle, passion, and necessary oversight. When you run an avoidant business structure, you build a solitary fortress. You hire brilliant, highly capable individuals, and then you check their work 3 separate times. You refuse to pass off the keys to the kingdom because your nervous system constantly whispers that the moment you look away, it will all burn down. The anxious entrepreneur and chronic people pleaser, or known as the endless pretzel. When your main goal in life is work is simply keeping everyone else happy, your well-being and success are the very first things to suffer. This pattern relies on a deeply burdened, hidden rule. We accidentally tell ourselves, if someone else is unhappy with me or they walk away, it means that I have failed. When you live by that rule, it changes your behavior in 3 distinct ways. First, you constantly say yes to extra tasks and responsibilities that don't make sense for you, or you just simply don't have the capacity for. Second, you undercharge for your time or let people take advantage of your energy. And third, you completely avoid having difficult, honest conversations just to keep the peace within your business. What is actually happening underneath the surface is that your internal alarm system goes into overdrive. Your body is constantly scanning the room, trying to spot any subtle sign of disapproval, disappointment, or unhappiness. Think of it this way. Some people push others away to feel safe. The people pleaser bends himself into a pretzel to keep everyone close and everyone happy. The moment you see a minor complaint or notice a colleague or family member having a bad day, your internal alarm system goes off and goes immediately into, I have to fix it. I have to fix everything. To quiet the noise, you also over-deliver, you overgive, you give away your boundaries for free, and you accept terms that make absolutely no sense for your life. The good student trap and the A+ fallacy. The next reality check is life doesn't hand out report cards, yet so many of us are destroying our energy to keep the peace and trying to get an A+. This pattern relies on subtle, unwritten rules that we carry with us from our early life experiences. First of all, we fall into the trap of believing that absolute compliance, perfectionism, endless accommodation are the only way to guarantee success. Second, we fail to realize that perfectionism is actually a defense mechanism to prevent criticism. It's not a tool for genuine personal growth. And finally, trying to get a perfect grade from every single person in your life results in a day-to-day schedule that is completely overcomplicated and exhausting. Something I hear often in my sessions, especially as I'm working with women, bit of a different topic, but as mom, working, friends, trying to take care of herself, we often hear, like, I just want to be perfect in every single part of my life. But unfortunately, that's not realistic. There's only so much of us to go around and only so many hours in a day. So what's happening beneath this behavior is a deeply ingrained habit. Your internal system learned very early that approval, acceptance were conditional upon flawless performances. As adults, we take that fragile, outdated rule book and try to apply it directly to our daily lives, relationships, and careers. As students, we learned that if we turned in a flawless paper, stayed late, and followed all the rules, we got an A+, and we were succeeding. But life is not a classroom. There's no teacher coming to reward you for over-delivering by 20% on a task. In fact, real world punishes that with absolute burnout, physical exhaustion, and zero time for yourself. Perfection isn't a sign of high standards. It's simply a sign of high anxiety. The disorganized pivot, chaos as a safety dynamic. Let's look at our final common pattern here. When stability begins to feel boring or even a little terrifying, we accidentally create crises to feel alive and in control. We can also call this a dopamine hit, where things feel calm and steady, and then we change something, and now all of a sudden that excitement comes back. So this pattern relies on hidden mechanisms that completely flip the script on smooth progress. First, it drives a cycle where you crave growth and progress, but you instinctively pull the emergency brake the moment things actually start running smoothly. Second, it shows up as a sudden, abrupt strategy that shifts, completely rewriting your goals or projects every few months, or creating artificial urgency for the people around you. And finally, you use organizational chaos as a giant distraction to avoid facing deeper and more quiet vulnerabilities. What's happening beneath this behavior is a state of deep internal conflict. It's almost like you're being pulled in two different directions, right? Excitement, keep going, and I'm going to try everything, and I'm going to grow, and I'm going to do great things, to, oh my God, what if someone sees me? They're going to think I'm a loser, or they're going to think I'm no good, or they're going to think that I'm not successful. Right? There's the imposter syndrome comes up, fear of being seen. So your system is experiencing two different forces at the exact same time, like I just explained. A strong desire for success and closeness alongside equally powerful fear of the exposure and risk that comes with it. And like a teeter-totter, it can kind of go back and forth. You might feel one more than the other during a certain time, and vice versa. So times that you might feel this, again, like Stephen said, if you have a slow month, or let's say if you have a few customers or clients who have canceled their services or canceled a membership or anything like that, that can start to become activated. So have you ever noticed that the moment things finally get quiet, organized, and steady, you suddenly decide to change the entire direction, launch a new project, or throw out your routine? When an internal system that isn't used to feeling settled and stable, calm can feel incredibly foreign and chaotic. So chaos starts to feel like a comfortable place. We consciously create new brand problems just so we can experience a familiar rush of stepping in to solve them. Question. So when you have a notification from a difficult client or customer, or a team member who made a mistake, what does your body do first? Does your heart race? Do you start to breathe heavy? Do you start to sweat? Do you start to swear in your head? Do you avoid the individual? Do you feel a panic? Does your chest tighten? Do your shoulders go to your ears? What happens for you when you see that notification from a difficult client or a colleague or a team member who's made a mistake on a task that you've given them? Okay, so for myself, when I get a notification from not necessarily a difficult client, but a client who maybe has challenged me emotionally that I'm working with in the past, or when I'm in a session and perhaps I say something wrong, or I draw a conclusion that might be off base, or I say something that might be offensive, which I don't aim to do, of course, but it happens. I'm human. I make mistakes. I start to sweat. I start to panic. My heart starts to race. I feel really nervous. I feel really, worried. Oh no, are they going to not want to work with me anymore? Have I offended them terribly? So physically, I have that reaction. And usually, what I do in session, since we're talking about it, is I just own it. I just own it. I say, I apologize. I say, I'm sorry. I take accountability for what's going. And sometimes I even say, man, that really made me sweat. That really made me nervous to communicate that to you. But behind the nervousness and the sweat is the fear of, oh gosh, are they going to not want to work with me anymore? Right? Anyone else?
Yeah, we've got Stephen.
So just a quick question, just in regards to like the attachment theory. Um, two questions actually. So you can actually fall into more than one of these attachment styles, if I'm understanding correctly. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
And then like with these attachment styles, like these, you had said they're formed from like early childhood experiences from like caregivers. So that's like your parents or like babysitters or grandparents or whoever kind of like brought you up, right? Like that would kind of shape your view in terms of, or I guess your mentality or your attachment style based on
Absolutely.
those like childhood.
Yeah. So for
Yeah. So I
example,
mean, I
oh, sorry,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, I was just
No.
gonna say, like for me, like when I was younger, like there was always a pressure to be perfect, right? And I found like really early on within my like professional career, I've exhibited different parts of these attachment styles. Like, like perfectionism was a real thing for me when I first started my career, like many years ago, and it was just I didn't trust my management career. Sorry, like I didn't trust anyone to do anything and I didn't want to hand off anything. And it led to like, as you said, burnout, right? And then, early before that, again, you're just trying to, climb up the rung of the corporate ladder and you just say yes, 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 even though you have no more capacity to take anything on. But as I said before, like we're in the like serial pivot now, but it makes a lot of sense because when I was younger, like chaos was normal for me. So as you're saying, explaining it now, when things get really calm within the business and it's going in a really stable, positive direction, I can kind of see how bringing chaos to pivoting my business model actually feels comfortable and gives that dopamine hit. So it's definitely full circle now, kind of see how my childhood, those early, childhood experiences kind of shape my view in terms of what feels comfortable within business.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And going back to your original question around attachment theory, yes, absolutely. So, whomever your caregivers were as a child, your interactions with them would determine how that attachment style would be developed within you. So, if you could go to mom, dad, and with a scraped knee, and they just loved you and kissed you and put a band-aid on your boo-boo, and then you learned that emotionally that you can rely on people to care for you, to show up for you, and to be there for you as you may need them. However, if you went to your parent with the same scraped knee and they said, "Oh, you're fine, suck it up, you're fine, just go get a band-aid in the bathroom," that might skew how you rely on people. And I realize that that is such a small, minute description or explanation, but something as small as that consistently can teach us at a very young age that, oh, we can't rely on someone when we're hurt or when we need emotional comfort. And that can show up in how we're running our business. So yes, absolutely, Stephen, you nailed it. Anyone else care to share? Okay. So a little bit about boundaries as a tactical business strategy. So clear, firm boundaries are not a luxury you get to enjoy only after your life or career is completely established. They are exact infrastructure that allows you to establish them in the first place. So when we look at what a boundary actually means on a daily basis, we can move past basic soft concepts. So there's three different boundaries here. We have operational boundaries, relational boundaries, and systemic boundaries. So operational boundaries are, as the name suggests, operational. So hard caps on revisions, explicit communication windows, and clean scoping sheets. So if there's a policy, for example, that has been created for whatever reason, that when a staff member or a colleague or perhaps a customer or client comes and tries to challenge that policy, you know that you're hard and fast. The policy isn't being changed unless, of course, it needs to be for operational reasons, of course. But fundamentally, that that you've created that policy, and that is a boundary that needs to be maintained throughout the entire business. Relational boundary is more around relationships. So expressing leadership needs directly without emotional padding or apologies for being the boss. So if you're asking, for example, for your staff to create social media, or you're asking them to do something as little as changing the garbage at the end of the night, or from smaller to bigger things, that you feel comfortable and confident to be able to approach them and have a conversation and be able to create a relational boundary around that, meaning if X happens, I have to Y. So if someone breaks a policy or breaks a rule, or there's a disconnect within the work environment, that you will go and have a conversation with them based on your own relational boundaries of, if X happens, I need to do Y. So systemic boundaries, which is more kind of legal contracts, HR, things like that, to enforce your fees and your policies. So your nervous system doesn't do it to live. So, or doesn't have to do it to live, sorry. So meaning, you're following your fee boundaries. If you have a late cancellation policy and there's a charge for it, that you are actually following through consistently on making sure that that boundary is explicitly followed. Okay. So when we look at what a boundary actually means on a daily basis, like I said, we have to move past the basic self-concepts. So true balance isn't just about scheduling a massage or taking a rest on a Sunday. It's about firm, clear contract with yourself and others on Monday morning. So if something comes in on Saturday and you have said to yourself, I am not working on the weekends, this is my boundary, it's my time to be with my family or my time to recharge, that when that call or that email comes in, that you strictly set a boundary for yourself. This will be the first thing that I deal with Monday morning. I know I'm guilty of, getting calls or emails that are coming in, and then I won't wait till Monday morning, and I will just deal with them right away. So it requires a practical working definition, setting hard limits on how many times you revise a project, creating strict communication windows, and having a clean exit strategies for relationships or situations that no longer align with your path. So this would look like, perhaps there's an employee who's not working out, or perhaps you need to set stricter boundaries at home because the business is getting busier, and some of the tasks that you had to do at home you're not able to give them the same attention that they required once upon a time, because the business is pulling you in a different direction. So being able to set those strict boundaries with colleagues or at home, to be able to make sure that everything is aligning with who you are, what you need, and the path of your business. And finally, it means expressing your needs directly to colleagues, peers, or family members without adding emotional padding, making excuses, or offering unnecessary apologies. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to have needs. It's okay to express those needs, and it's okay to set a boundary as it pertains to that need, right? So I need you to be on time for work on Monday morning, and if you can't be on time, let me know if there's anything I can support you. But if you continue to be late, then there's going to be consequence A, consequence B, whatever the case may be. So that would be a boundary, kind of expressing a need and expressing a boundary. And of course, your expectation. Because our struggle with boundaries is very simple reality. Establishing a healthy limit that requires us to build our internal capacity. We have to learn to tolerate the temporary, non-threatening discomfort of other people's disappointment within our internal alarm systems, misinterpreting it as complete, absolute emergency. We need to stop talking about boundaries as if they're a soft wellness concept. In the real world, boundaries are a functional asset. They're absolutely necessary for our health and well-being, and for our relationships, quite frankly. If you're apologizing when you enforce a late fee, protecting your evening hours, or standing by your terms, you're not doing those things, you're letting old, unwritten safety rules leak directly into your current success. Okay, so leadership integration audit. So if the structural issue is no delegation and CEO exhaustion, it's possible that you may have an avoidant attachment pattern. So there's hyperindependence. So what does it do? It helps protect you from the vulnerability of relying on others and being let down. The scope creep or margin erosion could potentially mean that you have an anxious attachment pattern, which is more the people pleasing. Protection from the discomfort of client confrontation or perceived rejection, trying to make everybody happy at your own expense. Constant pivots and strategic chaos. This could mean that you have disorganized attachment or fearful avoidant attachment. Protection from vulnerability of sustained visibility and quiet stability. Ask yourself, what is your current business layout protecting you from experiencing? Solve the safety block and operational block clears. So growth isn't about becoming entirely fearless. It's simply about becoming steady enough to keep going, to step out of your old automatic rules. We have to practice these things every single day. First, expand your capacity to be seen. Share your thoughts, your work, and your presence without shrinking back or over-explaining. Post that video. Send that email. Second, build your ability to tolerate uncertainty, making decisions even when you cannot predict or control the exact outcome. And finally, hold your own authority, standing by your value, your time, and your boundaries without needing constant reassurance. What we're doing here is updating your internal safety settings. We are teaching your system that it is safe to make mistakes without collapsing, and that you can be visible without bracing for a hit. This takes you out of survival mode and takes you back to connection within yourself and with those around you. True confidence doesn't mean the voice of doubt never visits you again. Unfortunately, it's not black or white. It means that when it does visit, it no longer has the power to stop you in your tracks. You're allowed to feel stretched, you're allowed to feel exposed, and you're allowed to be imperfect, and you're still entirely safe to move forward anyway. All right, so cultivating a securely attached business, which is where we'd like to go. No one is ever fully secure. Sometimes we dabble into some of the other attachment patterns, depending on the situation. And as we heal and as we grow, we start to dip more and more into secure attachment pattern. So what would change if you treated yourself like someone who's simply learning instead of someone who's constantly failing? What would curiosity, what would grace look like and self-compassion look like if you gave yourself the space to learn and not criticize yourself? Your old rules were designed to protect you, but they are now the exact things that are actually holding you back in growth. Real confidence doesn't mean you never have doubts. It means that those doubts no longer run your life. You're fully allowed to be a work in progress. Again, stretch your boundaries and be completely imperfect while remaining entirely safe moving forward anyway. So take a slow breath, trust the skills that you've built, and step into your next chapter. So, a couple questions that I have here. So, the first one is looking at the option you chose at the beginning of the hour. What is one boundary of delegation change you can implement next week to move from survival to secure? Or you can answer both of them or just one. If your business were securely attached, meaning you trusted your team, your boundaries were firm, and your standards were clear, what is the first thing you would delete from your calendar next week? All right. So lastly, let's close our reflection by looking at one final hidden pattern. True growth is about taking full responsibility for your own life while completely refusing to carry the emotional weight of everyone else. When we look at how this plays out in our day-to-day choices, it comes down to a vital distinction. You must own your choices, your reactions, and your boundaries. This is where your actual power lives. Second, you have to let go of the impossible task of managing other people's feelings, expectations, or unpredictable reactions. The reality of it is we can't control how other people respond or how they react. We can only control how we respond and react. And finally, we must realize that constantly stepping into fixing things for others doesn't actually help them. It simply drains your energy and keeps them stuck. What happens when you make this shift is a profound sense of relief. Your internal system finally stops treating other people's moods or disapproval as an immediate emergency that you must solve. This allows you to protect your energy and stay fully present for the things that matter to you most. And finally, you did something extraordinary. You built an enterprise out of thin air in the Niagara region. You used your grit, your intelligence, and yes, your coping mechanisms to get off the ground. But the survival strategies that helped you survive the startup phase will paralyze you in the scaling phase. It's safe to lay down the hyper independence. It's safe to build firm operational boundaries. Let's build businesses that aren't highly profitable, but deeply structurally secure. Thank you very much, everyone. Anyone have any questions?
Well, I want to say that this was such a great session. It really gave me a pause to reflect on my own work world. The questions that you were asking, just I need to give it more thought. Like they're not easy, they're not actually easy questions to answer, right? Like what would I if I did this and this, what would be the first thing that I wouldn't do on Monday? It's like, that's a great question. But I really have to think that through. So I appreciate that. Yeah.
No
What
problem.
did Kaylee say here? Kaylee said, really great reflection questions. Yes, I guess that's what I was trying to say. I agree with
Do
Kaylee.
have a workbook that I created that I can send out if everybody's interested. I will send it to Dolores and she can send it to everybody who's attended today and provide it to whoever may watch the session in the future. And it's very much shaped around some of the questions that we talked about today and really goes into more depth about each different attachment pattern and some different kind of qualities or symptoms that we may possess in each one of those attachment patterns. So it'll allow you to really reflect further and understand where you fall. And of course, it's not a neat and tidy box. We're not going to fit just into one. It just helps us to have a better understanding of who we are, what shaped us, who we've become, and kind of how that shows up in our business and different things that we can tweak to show up better in our business. But it's also important to remember that, like at the end I said, these coping mechanisms got us to where we are. They've made us successful. We just need to learn how to tweak them in a way that continues to further and grow our business and grow ourselves while trying to minimize some of the challenges or issues or negative experiences that they also bring along. So focusing more on the positive end of things and working on healing and growing and shaping the more negative impacts of that attachment pattern.
Mhm. And I feel that's exactly what we never take the time to do because we're just in the thick of things, right? But
Yeah.
when you have a moment to think about it, yeah, it makes all the sense in the world and it would really alleviate a lot of the pressure that we all feel every
Mhm.
day, right? And life would be so much better.
Mhm. And one thing too that I'd like to add as well about attachment and is that we don't have to have traumatic childhoods to
Yeah.
shape who we are and shape how we navigate things and cope with things. If we lived in a household where no one fought but there was not a lot of communication, that's ultimately going to shape how we communicate later on in life, because if it wasn't modeled to us or we didn't learn how to do it, or there wasn't an environment for us to shape that skill set, then of course we're going to have some difficulty with communicating later on in life. Same thing with dealing with conflict. If conflict never happened at home and being angry was something that wasn't, that was frowned upon, which is in most instances in society, we may not allow ourselves to feel frustrated and angry and set those boundaries and express what our needs are. And we may not want to talk to someone about what it is that we're experiencing or how we're feeling. If there was some sort of conflict that arise, we may stifle it, or we may push that person away, or we may become overly kind of dependent on their reassurance to know that we are okay mentally and emotionally. So attachment is fascinating. It's the foundation of the work that I do because it does show up so much in our lives, in every aspect of our lives, and how we navigate things and what coping mechanisms we utilize to get through anything in our life. Like I said, parenting, our business, work, um, romantic relationships, our friendships. It shows up in all aspects of how we relationship in general, in every environment, in every relationship that we have.
Yeah, makes sense. I see that Marisa put a little comment. Candice, this was so valuable and informative. Thank you. Big heart.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Marisa. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay.
Great. If
Seeing
anything
none.
pops up, don't hesitate to reach out on social media or ask for my information. Or if we're at a coffee networking event and you want to approach me and have a chat, I'm more than happy to have a chat. I'm extremely passionate about attachment theory and how it shows up for us. So approach me anytime. I'm happy to have a chat.
And Candice will be at the coffee club this Friday at the Magnificent Women's Boutique and Cafe at 8:30 to 9:30. So if you're not yet registered for that, I encourage you to do so. You'll have a great conversation with Candice for sure, plus lots of other people. We're going to take a little break over the summer with our Lunch and Learns. We'll be back in September with another great learning session. You're going to receive all the details in your What's Up Wednesday as we get closer to that date. Thanks again so much for joining us. Thank you again, Candice, for a great session. And
Of course.
everybody, have a wonderful afternoon. Take care,
Thank you very
everyone.
much, everybody. Have a great day. We'll see you around. Bye bye.